give yourself space to be who you are.
Mm,
If you can't land in yourself and be comfortable here, if you're always looking for a distraction, you're always keeping yourself in sympathetic. You have to be able to land in your space. And if that just means sitting and breathing and being aware of your breath and the space around you, that will go so far towards getting your mind in a set and your body in a set where you can be healthy, even though all these things are around you, even though
right.
all these toxins are coming in. And so mindset is the most important thing.
Welcome back to the Smart Not Harder podcast, your home for 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions. I'm your host today. My name is Dr. Scott Sher, and it's a pleasure to be back with all of you. I had a fantastic time interviewing a good friend and colleague, Dr. Christopher Shade, on the podcast today, and it was a tour de force, ladies and gentlemen. Here's a quick bio on Dr. Shade. So he's the founder and CEO of Quicksilver Scientific, which specializes in biological, environmental, and analytical chemistry of mercury in all its forms and the interaction with sulfur compounds, particularly glutathione and its enzymatic systems. He has patented a mercury speciation diagnostic process to analyze human toxicity, founded the only clinical lab in the world offering mercury speciation analysis, and has designed cutting-edge systems of nutraceuticals for detoxification and antioxidant protection, including advanced phospholipid delivery systems for both water and fat-soluble compounds. His Quicksilver delivery systems, nanoparticle technology increases the bioavailability of supplements and protocols, leading to higher efficacy products. He speaks all over the place. He travels all over the place. He has helped corporate executives, professional athletes. We talked about his celebrities in LA, patients with chronic immune disorders. He strives to evolve ways in the medical industry to deliver care better. And he's perpetually broadening the way the world understands health. And this is absolutely true. We had a really fantastic podcast, he and I, talk about all the aspects of what Chris does. We talked about mercury to some degree, but what we talked about was much larger. We talked about detoxification in general, from what I would say would be soup to nuts, the start to the beginning, all the processes that are required, all the things that can get in the way, what's required from a parasympathetic activation perspective, what's blocking it due to sympathetic activation. We talked about mercury as a specific example here. We talked about various aspects of how the detoxification system works and all the various things that block it, endocrine disruptors, glyphosate, endotoxemia. We talked about GABA, we talked about glutamate, air, water, food, and we then talked about travel and how to optimize travel and all the hacks that he does when he travels. We talked about his alcohol detoxification programs and how you can drink better without all the side effects, and goes to LA and other places to do this all the time. And we spoke at the end about how Chris can live smarter, not harder, and the ways that you guys and gals that are listening can do it too. We had such a fantastic time. It was truly a tour de force on detoxification systems. And one thing that I emphasized to Chris was the full spectrum of understanding this. And we talked about this in detail because he's a powerhouse here, and not just talking about detoxification. We even defined the word detoxification because that word is played around with so much these days. So I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. It was so fun to record with Dr. Shade. Final thing, please make sure you like and subscribe below so you don't miss another Smarter Not Harder amazing episode. And this podcast is brought to you by Transcriptions, makers of precision dose pharmaceutical grade and physician formulated buccal troches. Check it out at transcriptions.com. And our nonprofit organization, Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. Check us out at homehope.org. Enjoy the episode and see you soon. Dr. Chris Shade, how are you?
I'm doing very good, Dr. Scott Sher. It's good to see you here.
I know we live
Far
about
away.
5 minutes away from each other, and I've still yet to go to Quicksilver and check it out. But it's going to happen this fall.
You were scheduled to come over and visit me at my house when I lived a 5-minute walk from you, and then it burned down.
There's that. Yeah, we had
There's
our
that.
fires. Yeah, but you had lived in that house for maybe like a week or something like that. Is
I
that right?
was like 3 months. Yeah, I moved
Okay.
in August.
Yeah, I know. It was a rental, I think, right? You
Yeah, it
said?
was a rental, so I didn't have to rebuild.
Yeah, thank goodness for
Yeah,
you, not for the
yeah,
homeowner. But yeah, so we
yeah,
had fires, ladies and gentlemen, in our area, Louisville, Colorado. It looks like Louisville, but we say Louisville over here in
yeah.
Colorado.
The cultured ones.
Very cultured, extremely. And this was back a year and a half ago, and it was pretty devastating for a lot of people. And Chris and I were just coming back from a conference. We're like, oh, let's get together. And I was going to walk to his house. It was 6 minutes away, but then there was no house to walk to. So thankfully, mine is still standing
Yeah,
here, although my neighbors weren't so lucky as were Chris's.
yeah.
But so Quicksilver has been around in Louisville now for how many years? How long you been
Yeah, we were in
Louisville?
Lafayette and moved to Louisville. We actually opened our doors in 2006,
Wow.
and
Okay.
we're doing environmental testing of mercury, different forms of mercury, this thing
Right.
called mercury speciation, where you separate different forms. Then about 2008, 2009, we flipped over when there was a financial crash, we flipped over into healthcare and started doing human samples looking at mercury toxicity, and then eventually developed detoxification systems, which include making liposomes of glutathione and various things, and that sort of got us going in the direction that we've gotten to today.
Yeah. Now you're a stalwart in this world, and you've cut your teeth with being on the road, maybe 70% of your weekends and time, and so I have a lot of questions about that, actually, how you keep yourself,
Yeah.
detoxed and healthy, and what your hangover cures are, which I'm
Yeah.
sure you have many of,
Oh, I do.
lots of all the things you bring to parties to get everybody detoxed and okay for the next day, and other things. But the place I wanted to start today was kind of, it's your wheelhouse, and it's something that I think that the audience for this podcast is clinicians, it's practitioners, but also really really great, smart people that are interested in science, and like the word detoxification gets thrown around so much, as
Oh, yeah.
like everybody's talking about detox and how I'm detoxing. Like there's digital detoxes now, there's masturbation detoxes probably, and anything else in between. Dr. Ted wouldn't appreciate that, by the way, Dr. Ted, my
No.
colleague. No, but detox is everywhere. But I think what I love, what you often talk about, is how you created the whole program of the push catch, right? And I
Yeah.
want to get there, but I think before we get there, let's talk about what is supposed to happen. How does detoxification supposed to work? How does, and if you want to give an example of how something would
Yeah.
potentially be detoxified, that'd be awesome. However you want to take it, I'll give you the floor.
Sure. Yeah, and you brought up some examples of things that are, it's sort of a metaphor of detox, and there's something that we think is toxic for us, like our digital time. I don't know how masturbation can be toxic, but apparently some people think it is. I'm sure it can be. And so you want to get
Some
away from
churches.
this thing that's a toxin for you. Now, in your body, you got a ton of things that are toxins for you. You've got metabolic toxins. We're detoxing every time we breathe. We're moving CO2 out, and then we're bringing oxygen in. And so, at that level, we're detoxing, but all of our metabolic waste and even our cells are starting to break down, and those have to go away. But then there's all the stuff that we absorb from our environment. There's stuff stuck to food. There's pesticides and herbicides. And even if we're inorganic, there's different minerals that are on there that may not be good for us. There's different plant chemicals that are sort of hormetic stressors for us. They may wind something up through this moderate toxicity. In fact, most of the plant chemicals that we take are hormetic microtoxins, and
Mm.
they stimulate different things. And then some are very macrotoxins. And so we're exposed to mercury in our food, in our dentistry, in the air. We've got lead, cadmium, arsenic is your main metals. Then you've got all the pesticides and herbicides and the volatiles, and all these are getting in, and they get into the cells and they block different things. They may block an enzyme function. They may get into a hormone receptor and either activate the hormone receptor or block it from another hormone coming in and activating it. One of the classic things is mitochondrial dysfunction. They'll get in and they'll create damage to the mitochondria. Toxins can go in and they can cause telomere attrition, where they're damaging the ends of the chromosomes, and that in turn causes a mitochondrial dysfunction that makes the cell go into senescence. The
Mm.
toxic effect is always stopping the normal optimal functioning of the cell, and the extreme of it, it either kills the cell or puts it into a senescent state.
Right.
So if we're like living out in the woods or we're living in the middle of the ghetto, we're exposed to toxins either place. And you have a whole cellular machinery for getting rid of this stuff, for moving it out of the body. And, there's these compartments that we can talk about: a cell, and then the cell is within a whole tissue. And then you've got the mobile stuff. You've got the blood and the lymph that's circulating things. And then you've got the liver that's pulling the toxins out of the blood and dumping it from the blood into the bile. and then from there into the GI, and then you're pooping it out, or the kidneys are filtering toxins out and you're peeing them out. The skin is taking toxins out, you're sweating them out. Some of the volatiles you're breathing out. Now, a volatile breathing in and breathing out is a very passive process, but all this movement from cell to blood to liver to bile on is an active chemical process. And it's a process in which you have a series of enzymes and proteins that do different things, including transport them. So if we start at a cell, let's use mercury as our example toxin. And a mercury ion is inside the cell, and it'll exert its toxicity by binding onto usually a sulfur group on one of your proteins or one of your antioxidants, and it'll block that functioning. And so your body recognizes that that's not supposed to be there.
Okay.
So to get it out, you need glutathione. Now, glutathione we're well known for making a liposomal glutathione. It's an antioxidant. It's a detoxification molecule. It's an immune modulator. It's a growth modulator. But its largest functions are antioxidant detoxification. So you've got the mercury and it's stuck onto your cell, and then you need the glutathione to be in there, but then you need an enzyme. It's called a phase 2 enzyme. It's called glutathione S-transferase, and it needs to flip the attention of the mercury atom from the sulfur or the protein it's bound to over onto the glutathione. So boom, now you got a glutathione mercury conjugate, but you're still in the cell. It's not going to dissolve out. There's transporters that use magnesium and cellular energy, ATP, and they push it out of the cell. So that first step, I call it the microcosm of detoxification, is to move from the cell into the circulating fluids. Now this is lymph and blood, ultimately blood. And then you're in the circulating, and you're circulating through the blood. And now the macrocosmic aspect of detoxification is moving it out of the body. And there, that mercury glutathione conjugate comes by the liver sees it, grabs it, pulls it in, another transporter, same family of transporters, pulls it into the hepatocyte. If it needs some extra processing, that'll happen. And if it doesn't, it just gets pushed with the bile salts into what's called the bile canaliculus. These are little, like, if you picture an upside down tree with roots going up into the liver, that's the bile tree. And the littlest rootlets are called the canaliculi, and they're attached to every hepatocyte. And so you actively transport bile salts and toxins into the bile flow. So if you're cholestatic, it means you can't move bile out of your liver, can't move toxins either. So from there, it goes down through the little ducts, joining into the common bile duct, through the gallbladder, and then into the upper GI. And then, ideally, you're going to poop it out. Except a lot of those things get reabsorbed. A lot of the toxins go down to the GI, and you reabsorb them. They go back into the blood and make their way back into a tissue. So we went from the cell to the blood to the liver to the stool, or cell to the blood, and you go through the kidneys. And it's actually in the proximal tubules of the kidneys. You have the same transporters that you have in the liver, and they pull it from the blood and they dump it into the urinary flow. And so those are the main movements of toxins out. And these things are going on all the time. And that whole system always has to work, because you're always moving toxins, either endogenous, self-made toxins, metabolic toxins, or exogenous toxins. I mean, think of how much nitrogen you're peeing out every day. That's detoxification. So stuff is always moving out. Now, that whole system can become weak or lazy, or it can become activated and really moving. And as we get through talking about how we do detox, almost everything we're doing is just pushing up that system and making it work better and taking all the blockages out of it and making it super efficient.
That was beautiful, Chris. Okay. Thank you. I think you've done this before, but I think the way you've described the whole process is, I think, great for anybody listening, because I think some of us think of detox in maybe some small pieces of all that, but the ability to kind of put it all together. So, and I think what you said at the end there is the most important, right? Is that sounds great. Yeah. Does it work all the time? And the answer is no, right? Because what you described earlier is that we are just bombarded with
Yeah.
toxins, inside, outside, metabolic toxins, exogenous toxins, pollution, water, air, everything.
Yep.
And so our body's under consistent stress. And I'm sure you're seeing this as well, Chris. I mean, younger and younger people are getting sicker and sicker
Yeah.
because their process of their ability to detoxify goes down, right? And so when you're thinking about how to optimize the system, it seems to me that what you have done differently is to think about all those steps together as
Hmm.
opposed to one. How did
Yeah.
you get there from looking at it, way back when you started looking at mercury? Was it some psychedelic journeys that kind of gave you an epiphany, or was it how did you figure out that it was because most detox that happens in conventional medicine, as you know, is just let's try to bind the toxin. Let's do like
Yeah.
EDTA or
Yeah.
chelators and et cetera. But they're not thinking about how well are you cholestatic, for example? That's a big one. Or how
Yeah.
well you're pooping. How did you
Yeah.
get to the place where you figured out that there needed to be all these conceptual things put together for
Yeah.
your place to do it?
I started doing it in the early Mercury days. And, because I started with a Mercury specific binder, I had a mouthful of Mercury.
Mm.
I had this guy take all my, like 17 amalgams out in one day. And then I'm like, now I'm going to take a bunch of DMSA and I'm going to measure all the mercury coming out my pee. And nothing's coming out. There's this
Ah,
little bump. And so I'm like, well, I just got to take more. I must have a DMSA deficiency. And I take more and then nothing's coming out. And I'm just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. I just feel like hell. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking I was going to make a detox system. I thought I was going to be a testing lab and
mm,
people were going to do challenge tests. I'm going to tell them how much was methyl mercury from fish and how much was inorganic mercury from dental amalgams. And I'm trying this on myself and I'm just getting worse and worse and worse
mm,
and worse. And I'm going to these functional medicine meetings and these guys are talking, these were, gut specialists like Nigel Plummer from Soroil. Pharmax was his original company, the first probiotic guy, and Bob Roundtree's talking about
sure.
the gut and the immune system and toxins and I just had this epiphany there in the dark night of my biochemical soul when I felt so horrible. I'm like, wait a second. I can pull this out through the gut. I should not be going through the kidney because they're talking about how fragile the kidneys are. I'm like,
Yeah, sure.
obviously nothing's going out and I feel horrible, so it's got to be in me. And I went back and I cleaned up these pure silica particles that we grafted sulfhydryl groups onto. Sulfhydryl, or it's kind of sulfur that's on glutathione or
Yep.
DMSA or DMPS. So it's like a little chelator on a stick, and you eat it, and it goes through and it binds everything that gets to your GI, and you poop it all out.
So it
And
stays
so
completely intra GI, like intraliminal.
totally, it
Okay.
doesn't go into circulation, only
Right.
working from there. And oh my God, a couple of weeks of this pulled me right out of the hole I was in. And I was like, God, this stuff's great. And then I introduced it to, famous old dudes, Dietrich Klinghardt and Hal
Yep.
Huggins. And they were both like, wow, this fills a hole in our toolbox like nothing else. And so they started using it and the stuff was great. It was because it anchors it and you clear everything out of the GI. And we don't even understand it yet, but there's a feedback loop back to the body when you start binding everything in the GI that it says, okay, it's good that we can let more stuff down there. Because
As
just like,
opposed to recirculating it
yeah,
in. Yeah.
but at certain points, it's like, I don't think it's safe to dump it in there. The gut's toxic, the liver's, beat up, and you have to say, no, it's safe. Everything is going to go out, and then
Mm,
everything starts moving. And then from there, I learned why that was working. And then I learned about these phases of detox and this
right.
relay race, and that it's all part of the glutathione system and all the things that are tied into it. And then I was like, oh, now I can add a supplement for the glutathione. I'll make liposomal glutathione. And now I'll have some lipoic acid to upregulate NRF2, and I'll get some polyphenols in there. And so I started putting it together,
Right.
and I had, the remnants of, or the rudimentary aspects of, doing a cell thing and a binder, but I didn't have it all smooth together. And it was when I started working on autism. And I learned two things in autism. One, was to use CBD to downregulate the neuroinflammation, which is blocking detoxification. And
Yes.
after this, we should talk about all the things that shut down or significantly downregulate
Yeah.
detoxification.
That's where I
So,
was going to go next. Yeah.
right.
You're
And
with me. Yeah.
so I got the CBD, chill the autonomics out and the nervous system out so you can do detox. Do detox. And at that point, I'd really put together how the bile flow and the toxin flow has to go together. And so you'd chill them out. Then you'd get the toxins that, the things that mobilize the toxins and move them with the bile. And then you come in 30 minutes later with the binder to grab all that. And all of a sudden, you took these autistic kids that before that you had to use a homeopathic or something. You had to just say the name glutathione. That's all they could handle. They would hurts from just a name. But
Right.
once you controlled that, we had
Yeah.
the push, the catch, and the CBD. It was like, oh my God, we're off to the races. And we were doing like hardcore detoxes on these kids and
And they were
very
tolerating
safely
it.
and really
Yeah.
changing stuff. And that's when I moved it all, into mainstream.
Yeah. That's
And I'll
great.
tell you that the
Yeah.
the the first like patient that I tried this on was James Caan, the late great James Caan. His
Wow.
trainer brought him to me, and he was in this building filled with mold. He was all fucked up, and he was depressed, and he was exhausted.
Wow.
And we first called liver sauce Sunny Sauce, for his character, the Godfather, and
Wow.
and
Wow.
and we put him on this system, and talked to him like 4 weeks later. He's like, Dr. Shade, you're a genius. I feel great. It's really funny, but that was when we really tied it all together,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
made it super effective.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, like these things sometimes are serendipitous in the sense that they
Yeah,
have to happen to us on some level, and we have to have the right people that we're involved with and talking to, and then all of a sudden it's like, it's like this major sort of epiphany for everybody that this is what we can do. But
yeah,
I think I'd like to go back to what you were talking about before, because I think that you made a really good point, and that's where I was looking to go too. Is how can detoxification go pear-shaped, as they say in Ireland, and like there's a lot of different ways that this can happen. I think and you talked about CBD. Maybe we should start off with that aspect, I think, which would be more on the
yeah,
parasympathetic side. So talk about that.
yeah. On the neurological side,
Yeah.
so in our brain uh, we've got in the neurotransmission, we've got excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters, and 80% of that activity is between glutamate and GABA.
Yes.
Glutamate, like we worry about monosodium glutamate causing glutamate toxicity, but
Headaches.
glutamate hits the glutamate receptor and makes you on it. You're like, where's the bear? Where's the trouble? Where's the fight? Or what do I got to do? And that is with the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight side. The
Right.
other side, the neurotransmitter is GABA, and it's your Zen neurotransmitter, and like everything's cool now, I'm going to relax. And it
Yes.
goes with the parasympathetic side or the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous
Right.
system,
Right.
which is rest. People say rest and digest. No, it's rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify.
Love
It's
it.
the whole healing side of it.
Yes.
So, because it's priority of how you're going to use your cellular energy. And if the priority is fight or flight, you shut down all that other shit. I'm not using energy to do that while I got to run away from the bear, while
Right.
my wife is chasing me and she's going to kill me, while anything is happening.
Right. Exactly.
And then when we're under stress, we're going into that sympathetic side and we're down regulating the repair regeneration side. And if
Right.
we chronically get into stress and we're like looking at something like, oh my God, this is a bear. And it's like, no, it's this guy's business card and I just haven't called him. And oh my God, he hates me. Oh my God, and this. And oh my God, the bills are coming. And oh, my employees hate me. And you're like this all the time. You're chronically down regulating detoxification. And then chemically, what it thinks, mercury's main target in the brain is the glutamate receptor, and it fires it up. And what happens when the glutamate receptor is fired up? You get anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So chronic stress and then anxiety. What is anxiety? It's chronic memory of trouble. You're remembering trouble all the time. So it's putting you in the fight or flight. And the mold toxins go on that receptor. Glyphosate, the stuff we like to, sprinkle on all of our food out there, that goes onto the glutamate receptor.
It does. I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a glutamate receptor agonist, and so it's a glutamate excitotoxin. This is probably the worst aspect of what it does.
I didn't know.
And
Wow.
then you get into hormones, and you get estrogen versus progesterone in women. So women, when they go into perimenopause, go into this relative estrogen dominance because their progesterone drops like a rock in the pond through their 40s, and the estrogen's just sort of coasting down slowly, and so they have this estrogen excess, and estrogen excess blocks the bile flow. It creates cholestasis. That's why
Mm.
there's cholestasis of pregnancy
Mm.
during those estrogen bumps. And then estrogen in the brain is a glutamate receptor agonist, and it
Yes.
accentuates glutamate activity. It's why it makes you anxious and bitchy. And what does progesterone do? It's a GABA agonist, and it
Yes.
opens up bile flow, and it makes you chill. And so there's a 10-year period where women are chronically not detoxifying and chronically stressed out, which is chronically stopping the detox, and then they're accumulating the toxins, which is forwarding the cycle. And so there's this massive neurological and neurochemical way that you can constantly downregulate your detoxification.
It's amazing. Actually, all these things are happening. And I mean, it's all biochemical, and people think it's all in their head, and it is on some
It
level. Like
is.
these are all biochemical changes that are happening. And I often talk about this with patients too. I mean, I say to them, it is all in your head, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything about it. So,
Yeah.
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 And
No,
so,
and a lot of that stuff's starting down here and getting up to the head. And then biggest, well, it becomes neurological. Biggest, we're going to call it exogenous way to blow out detox is endotoxemia. So endotoxin are these parts of bacteria. It's not the whole bacteria. It's part of the cell membrane of the bacteria. And these are, I think they're usually gram-negative bacteria, of which you have
yeah.
a ton of in your GI tract. So when people talk about leaky gut, that's inflammation in the GI that's breaking the tight junctions between the cells and allowing things to get through. And it's not going to allow a whole cell to get through, but parts of
Right.
the membrane can get through, and undigested proteins can get through. And over on the other side, you're having allergic reactions to the little peptides that are getting in, and the endotoxin gets all through the body, and the immune system sees it and thinks it's a septic infection. It thinks, oh my God, there's like poop in my blood here, and it winds up inflammation. And inflammation shuts down detoxification. So that's, there's the neurological way to stop detox, and then there's the inflammological, the inflammatory block of
Yes.
detox. And endotoxin is the biggest inflammagen to do this. And the reason inflammation blocks detox is because inflammation is, there's like cellular damage, inflammation from injury, but
Right.
most is reacting to presence of microbial infiltration. So
Right.
viruses and bacteria and stuff, and you're winding up inflammation. And how does your immune system kill a bacteria? With pro-oxidants. It's
Right.
making hydrogen peroxide, hypochlorous acid, bleach, superoxide, and it's whaling them with these pro-oxidants trying to kill them. Now, detoxification is part of your antioxidant system. You're
Right.
using glutathione, and intermeshed with that are, glutathione peroxidase, thioredoxin reductase, glutaredoxin, superoxide dismutase, your whole detoxification antioxidant system. So when you're trying to kill things with pro-oxidants, you just shut down
Of
the
course.
antioxidant system, which means you're shutting down the detox system. So when you have chronic endotoxemia, meaning stuff moving through leaky gut into circulation. The other one that people miss all the time is periodontal infections leading to endotoxemia, and then chronic UTIs leading to endotoxemia. All those shut down detoxification in all your cells, and they go into the liver and they shut that bile flow down. Boom, just shut it down. And up in the brain, then to reinforce the neurological shutdown, they are actively creating something called neuroinflammation, where they take
Yes.
immune cells in the brain called microglia that are supposed to be for synaptic pruning and like changing your neural network and having, they're probably strongly at work after a big psilocybin dose, and you just reset,
Right.
your default mode network, and they are in there doing their thing, and they're, making their Michelangelo up there. And then they get these triggers from endotoxin that tells them to be like circulating immune cells and start releasing pro-inflammatory
Right.
cytokines. And
Right.
then those interact with the glutamate receptors, and the glutamate receptors get irritated by them, and they secrete other things that re-irritate the microglia. So there's this
Feedback
perpetual
loop.
thing going,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then endotoxins speeding it up on one side, the toxins are speeding it up on the other side. So that's, that whole core, the neurological, the endotoxemia, and how it all works together, and then hormone problems, all really strongly turn down the functioning of the detoxification system, more even than the SNPs. And then you got SNPs too,
Right.
single nucleotide polymorphism.
Right.
So your glutathione transferase may only be at, 50 or 70% of what the possibilities are. And so there's lots of layers of all this.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about testing in this case, I mean, obviously there's the process of thinking about this in a very holistic framework, as you just very beautifully did. And the way I think about it too. And also one thing that I also think about with endotoxemia is also, creating a leaky brain. We talk about having a
Yep.
leaky gut. But leaky brain is almost as common, or maybe more common.
I think they just open and close together,
You
because the
think? Yeah.
inflammation opens the the inflammation coming from the endotoxemia opens up the blood-brain barrier, and so they think if you got one, you pretty much have the other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think about too. I mean, I think certainly since the pandemic, but even before this, I mean, people with chronic infections, with chronic post-infectious types of resurgence, right? Like they didn't have any issues, but now they have like EBV, they have mold, they have Lyme, and things.
Yeah,
it's a mess because their immune system was just knocked down, and also their gut became more permeable. Then everything else just kind of went again pear-shaped as a result of that. So,
and it was a direct NRF2 inhibitor, an AMPK inhibitor, and so it just like sets you up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
COVID
it was
was a
very
direct NRF2
dysregulating to the immune system. And so the immune system only thought one thing, and, there's COVID, and it forgot everything else. And so all the beasts inside you all rose up. But yeah, it was a direct NRF2 inhibitor. And so then all of a sudden, a lot of people, I think they've held on to a lot of that downregulation of NRF2, which is the main trigger for detoxification. And so they start accumulating toxins too. But I mean, it's just people are really in bad shape now post-COVID.
I know it's just been really challenging to work with people. I'm sure you're seeing this too.
Oh yeah.
When you think about on the testing side, what do you think is most important for people to test? Because we talked a little bit offline, like what Dr. Ted and our team do is what's called metabolomic testing, looking at cellular metabolism, vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, looking at antioxidant levels, looking at toxicity levels. Do you see what is the importance, do you feel, or what is sort of the important things for people? Like if you're a practitioner, what should you be testing your clients or your patients do?
Yeah. And you'd said you're looking at metabolomics. I'm like, well, I don't really, I would thought you were getting really granular with, different peptides and stuff, but just your basic stuff, you do need to look at that. I mean, a strong antioxidant panel will tell you how well NRF2 is functioning. If there's lots of oxidative stress, you're going to have to really support that. Remember, detox is all in that antioxidant function. Now, for better immune function, we like pro-oxidant function, but for detox, we like antioxidant function. So you see that antioxidant function is down, you're going to have to bring in a lot of vitamin C's and glutathiones and fat-soluble antioxidants. And I see a lot of oxidative stress now for sure. And D is down. You definitely have to bring in D. A lot of people look to oat tests, to try to figure out if they have mold or not. Measuring for toxins is a tough thing. Now you can do metals easily, and you can get your main metals, but some of these weirder ones, you won't see, and then mold testing is kind of hit or miss whether you're going to see the molds or not. There's vibrant and Great Plains have some decent environmental toxin panels,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
as much as you can spend the money, I would go out, I would first do all your just core functional metabolomics and then go out and look for some of these toxins. Because, if one of them, sticks out like a sore thumb, you're going to have to directly address that. But in your, if it's just a blend of them all, you have a generalized detox approach. And in fact, what I moved from, I was specifically going for metals, and I realized I was getting a lot of other things with it.
Mm.
And then I realized, wait, I can have this huge generalist detox that gets everything. And then if I need specifics, I'll add in liposomal EDTA. I'll add in more of the specific metal binder. I'll add more of carbon-based binders during the day for mold toxins. But I've come to this, sort of universalist approach to detox.
And then, so from that large umbrella, you can take and target various types of things depending on testing.
Yeah.
But like overall, that you have created an overall system that's going to push as you want and catch as you'd like. And
Yeah.
and then you can say, okay, then you have very specific toxins, very specific needs, and then or antioxidant needs and things like that you could use those and give those, in like sort of more of a targeted fashion.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You overlay some specificity over the generalist approach.
Makes sense. Yeah. So when you mentioned earlier about the GABA glutamate system,
Yeah,
and we actually find that very interesting. We have a couple of different products at Transcriptions that we're looking at of the GABA system specifically. Now,
right.
what do you think about GABA supplementation in general? Because there's a little bit of, GABA direct supplementation. There
Yeah.
is some controversy as to whether GABA can actually get into the brain or not. And when you're trying to, and corollary to that is, as you're trying to balance that system more on the GABA side, what kinds of things are you using to typically do that?
Yeah, so that's a beauty when you're making nanoliposomes, small liposomes, a certain membrane structure. They've, we're not able to measure the GABA right in the brain. We don't have the technology for that,
Right.
but there's a lot of research around the kind of particles that we do and the kind of structures that they have that they can get across the blood-brain barrier. And we
Right.
do a liposomal GABA L-theanine that everybody responds really well to. And so in the trying to get over to the GABA side, we're either using a CBD blend
Right.
or
CBD.
a GABA blend or both. We have CBD Synergies AX. AX is for anxiety, and that's CBD and GABA and skullcap and some 5-HTP and I think one other chamomile extract,
Mm.
hitting it a bunch of different ways. Like skullcap is increasing GABA agonism, so it's more responsive to the GABA. You just have our GABA L-theanine if people are worried about taking CBD. And in autism, you'd find kids who are reactive to cannabinoids, and they do really well with just the pure GABA. So those are the two ways that we really go after it. There's really three. There's CBD, there's GABA, and then there's herbals that work as GABA agonists. Actually, there's four. And then there's hormones,
That's
because
where I was going to go. Yeah. Tell
that's
me.
what
Yeah.
progesterone does. And it's just freaking wonderful. And we don't use progesterone with guys enough. We think, oh, that's a girl thing,
Mm-hmm.
but really guys' progesterone should run kind of similar to follicular women, 1 to 2,
Right.
and
Right.
I forget, nanograms per deciliter or
I
something,
forgot
one to
the
two in
units too.
there.
Yeah.
And so, we have a topical nano serum of progesterone, and guys, especially guys who don't sleep well, oh my God, it's just makes them putty. They sleep like babies. Me, if I'm being an asshole, you just freaking force that stuff on me. My ex-wife would say that. She's like, I think it's time for some progesterone. My girlfriend is like, run that stuff on there. You're being a dick. And,
Yeah.
and it works great. And so, I think we should use that more. I
Okay.
definitely use it a lot with women in detox.
So
And
you guys have a product with progesterone that's a cream, or
we
was
we
it
have a whole female
okay?
hormone system. We have a nanoserum of progesterone, a nanoserum of estradiol, a nanoserum of estriol, and a biest, and then an oral nanoemulsion of DHEA and pregnenolone with dim, chrysin, ginseng, maca, and dong quai. And that covers everything. That DHEA pregnenolone with the herbs just really hits the androgens. Women's DHEA and testosterone go up together. Their test will be at the top end of the reference range. DHEA will be a little super physiologic. And then, through cosmetic laws, basically, you're doing cosmetics of progesterone and estrogens. And
Mm.
it does everything.
Mm. Um, on the testosterone side of things, how do you see the testosterone levels playing into this, and kind of when you're thinking about it?
Yeah, that one's not as clear.
Yeah.
I know a lot of toxins are xenoestrogens, and they can make men more estrogenic. Toxins do that heavily. I mean, mold is one of the easiest ways to get gynecomastia, and so it's forcing test into estrogen. Other things are just acting on estrogen receptors. The plastics do that. Some of the metals do that, and so testosterone can kind of like normalize, bring that male energy and that drive back up, put some heat into the system. Uh, but directly, other than that, I don't see it directly turning up bile flow or turning up conjugation
Right.
like pregnenolone and progesterone do.
Got it.
So NRF2 is this trigger in the cell that we're trying to hit to get the cell to throw the toxins out. It's called a nuclear transcription factor. It goes into the nucleus and it turns up all the genes for detox and antioxidant function. So you get a whole burst of that activity in the cell, and that'll kick toxins out of the cell. So that's a super important thing for us. And then we couple that to the bile flow and the binders, and that's how the whole system works.
Right.
And so those NRF2 upregulators, these are things like lipoic acid, sulforaphane, quercetin, and lutein, a little lesser degree, but they still do it. Now, to upregulate, for NRF2 to go in and do all of its things, it needs co-participation of another uh, nuclear receptor called PXR. It's the pregnane X receptor, and it is activated by pregnenolone and progesterone. So
Mm.
this is why I see in the beginning, like when I first started, there was all these 50 something women, like 45 to 55-year-old women coming in, having mercury toxicity from amalgams they had for 20, 30 years,
Mm.
and just like everything's falling apart. Now, yeah, part of that is, the hormones. Well, part of them feeling bad is the hormones being low, but their distinct toxicological symptoms were because these hormones were not there to support NRF2.
Mm.
NRF2 is seen to go down with age. Its activity goes down with age. Just like glutathione levels go down with age, they're going down with it. And part of that is because the hormone system is responsible for giving it a certain amount of activity. And so pregnenolone and progesterone fit more into detoxification than testosterone and estrogen do, except for the fact that in the brain, some of the toxins under high testosterone, low estrogen loading are more toxic than the other way around.
Mm.
So even though estrogen has a glutamate receptor activity to it,
Mm.
it's got a strong neuroprotective aspect. When Boyd Haley was doing work around neurons and mercury, he found that if he put extra testosterone in, the mercury was more toxic. And if he put
Mm.
in estrogen, then it was less toxic. And this
Mm.
is part of the syndrome of the autistic boys, or autistic children being 4-to-1 boys to
Yeah.
girls,
Yeah.
is that susceptibility that the high testosterone environment has. Women, they can take a beating more than men. We're all tough as shit, and then we fall over pretty easily.
Yeah. We don't give birth. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, we don't do any of that.
We wouldn't be able to do that very well.
No,
I
you need a
always,
special brain for that.
I know. So that's really interesting that testosterone can make mercury more toxic.
Yeah.
And we're not, is it just because the estrogen's more neuroprotective? Is that what it comes down
That's
to?
just
Yeah.
it didn't get down to deeper mechanism other than estrogen being more neuroprotective.
Interesting. So, and this is another reason, we talk about, with bioidentical hormones with women, why it's so important to consider those, because of you're becoming like a man in the sense that like get the same risks of all these other things.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, right now, my baseline estrogen's higher than my girlfriend, until she slathers up with the estrogen and it comes up above mine,
Yeah.
and we were doing pharmacokinetic studies. She's like, yours is higher than mine. I'm like, yeah, it is.
She couldn't tell from your bitchiness, or no?
But my testosterone's also super high. Now, what's really bad is when it switches and the girl's testosterone's higher than the guy and the guy's estrogen's higher than the girl. Then it's a real mess.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about this before with just the endocrine disruptors that we have going on in the just the world around us and disrupting, especially. I know there's a big thing about BPA free kinds of things, right? But that's all bullshit, right? As far as like, I mean, what kind of other
BPA free is totally bullshit because they put in a different plasticizer.
Right.
Now there's BPS and there's BAA and there's all these different ones. BPA free my ass, man. It's plastic. There's a plasticizer in there. And all of them. And, at first we saw that they gave rise to all this obesity. And so we called them obesogens, okay. And they must be on the estrogen receptors and overactive, making you all estrogenic and stuff. Well, a big part of it is they're direct sirtuin inhibitors.
Yes.
So they were turning down mitochondrial function and metabolic function. At the same time, they were upregulating estrogenic activity.
You've talked about another concept.
So they end up being cardiotoxins too, because of
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then does this all fall into the category? You've talked about this in another podcast called gerontogens, or is that?
Yeah. So they're all kind of gerontogens now because, some of them were like the real direct gerontogens were causing the telomerase attrition or telomere attrition, which would cause mitochondrial dysfunction, which would flip the cell into senescence. Right. And the senescent cell is one that ceases to grow and starts spreading pro-inflammatory cytokines and recruiting other things into senescence. So those are direct gerontogens. But now these ones that are doing mitochondrial inhibition, well, there's through sirtuin deactivation, well, that's a direct gerontogen too, because those are our longevity pathways. So, the toxins, it used to be, when I started, it was about pulling mostly younger people out of a toxic hole. They were beaten down and you're bringing them up. And now there's a lot of trying to increase the health span and the lifespan of people. In fact, we did a 3-month detox intervention on 40 people and did true age diagnostics before and after. We looked at the Sinclair clock, which is the biologic age clock, and we looked at the Dunedin pace algorithm, which is the rate of aging. It's better for shorter things. And we were able to take a year of age off in 3 months and way slow down the rate of aging just through these detoxes. The problem is all the stuff we use for detox are also mitochondrial enhancers and metabolic enhancers, AMPK activators, as well as NRF2. But that whole approach, that took age off, whereas, when they were trying to just do NAD building, it didn't do anything.
Yeah. So, just to go back for a second, gerontogens, what is the actual definition of a gerontogen, just so people know?
Anything that accelerates the rate of aging.
Right. So anything that accelerates the rate of aging is basically called gerontogen. So
yes.
So alcohol is a good one for everybody, ladies and gentlemen, right? So
which brings us
to what I want to talk about here, I kind of as we're going through, is that you and I travel. Yeah, but you travel a lot, right?
Yeah.
And so you're always in environments where it's very difficult for you to have any real control of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And I think you like to have a little bit of booze every once in a while. I think,
do.
I think you do, and so and a lot of people do, and that's totally cool.
Especially when you travel, especially when you're traveling for business.
Yes, as Dr. Ted says, we have better drugs, but alcohol's okay. And so as a result of that, right? I still work in the hospital actually part-time. And what I see most of the time is everything we've just been talking about go wrong, because if people drink alcohol, they become cholestatic, their liver stops working, they get toxic, and they stop being able to function and they die, right?
Yeah.
Liver dysfunction is terrible. Don't ever
Yeah.
do it. It's bad. So just, the more you know, like remember those commercials from back in the 80s,
Yeah.
don't do that to your liver. It's a bad idea. So,
Yes.
but when you're thinking about this on a sort of day-to-day basis, when you're
Yeah.
going out, you're having, I mean, this, I think just from a practical perspective, like what is your stack or what do you talk, like, I'm
Yeah.
going to go out and have some drinks tonight. I'm not going to sleep as well as I'd like, what would you do
So yeah,
pre, during, post? Yeah.
how do I work against that? Because
Yeah.
alcohol, there's a whole thing. There's the spirit of it. It brings up the spirit, and so it's not
That's why it's
just
called the
it's
spirit.
stuck there, and I have to deal with it. I mean, there's a nice aspect to it.
Of
It's a
course.
GABA
Of course.
receptor and stuff,
Sure.
but yeah, it screws with your liver and it blocks the bile flow and it distorts the immune system. So how are we going to do with that? So my stack for drinking is nano milk thistle, and that is by far the strongest part of the whole thing. And I got a lot of people in LA I give that to, and they're like, "Oh my God, I can really function with this stuff."
Use it before you drink, you take it?
Before, and if it's a long session, middle, we might hit it, 2 or 3 times in a night. But there's three. It's the milk thistle, histoaid, which is a quercetin, luteolin, dim, and vitamin C, and it turns down histamines because alcohol
Yes.
makes your mast cells more reactive.
Right.
It starts making you more allergic. That's part of what alcohol, it's creating a Th2 shift where you're becoming a little bit more allergic. So you want to
Right.
stabilize that with the histoaid. But histoaid is also helping upregulate some of the detox elements. And then liposomal B complex. The three of those, we call that the enabler.
What about glutathione? Is that part of the stack?
Yeah, now it is, but these three are actually more important. And
Interesting. Okay.
glutathione is more I take at the end to make sure that I'm not depleted overnight. So it's in there for the body to work with.
The
Some
alcohol
people will
itself.
just use glutathione. Believe me, I've tried this all out. Glutathione helps, but the others are more important during the drinking of the glutathione at the end.
Interesting. What about, so back to milk thistle. I've known about milk thistle. I think everybody's probably heard about it. Do you
Yeah.
know how it actually works? Because I'm not sure the
No,
mechanism.
it's weird. And when you get it in the nano emulsion, it's like the pills never did that. The
Yeah.
nano emulsion totally does it. And you've got this stuff called silymarin, and it's upregulating phase 1 enzymes, it's upregulating phase 2, but it stabilizes phase 3. This is one of the most important things. When the hepatocyte is under a chemical pressure, the transporters that move bile and toxins out of the hepatocyte into the bile canaliculus can shut down or even internalize into the cell. And they go into a little liposome in the cell and wait for the coast to clear until they can come back out.
Wow.
Now, that's kind of funny because you need to get the toxins out of the liver,
Yeah.
and they're thrown in the towel and they're surrendering. And the milk thistle gets in there and beats on them, puts them back, and stabilizes them in the membrane so you can drain the stuff out of the hepatocyte. Because what happens if you don't drain it out of the hepatocyte, you dump it back into the blood. It builds up into the hepatocyte, starts to poison the hepatocyte, even the bile salts. Bile salts are there for dissolving fat in the GI. And so if they build up in your hepatocyte, they're going to dissolve your cell. And so then you dump everything back into the blood, and then you start getting itchy. And you're itching, pruritus, that is bile salts lodging underneath your skin. Long before you're jaundiced, you start itching.
Right.
And then, the toxins are going back in, you're getting some brain fog, maybe your kidneys are stressed then. That's all the liver, giving up and dumping everything back into the blood. So milk thistle keeps it flowing out, but it must upregulate some of these enzymes that are breaking down alcohol. Alcohol's problem is that you don't just conjugate it to glutathione and pop it out. You're turning it to acetaldehyde, which is embalming fluid, and then all these other secondary things. Depending upon what your SNPs are, you're making other weird things. And what you see, like, something will build up, and that's your weak link there. And so milk thistle must be smoothing out that chain, but at a liver level, it makes sure that all that keeps moving. The other thing we use a lot of when we're drinking is bitters.
Okay.
because that's stabilizing the bile flow as well. And then the
Okay.
next day, definitely morning after, glutathione and bitters. I find the bile flow has been held back from that toxicity. So you just got to keep everything moving out. And then what do you do the next day? And
Go
how do
back to
I get
drinking.
over
Hair of the dog.
travel? What's that?
Hair of the dog. Just kidding.
The dog, yeah. No, the next day, then you want to do this whole push catch liver detox thing. And so the push catch is the liver sauce and the binder. The liver sauce has the bitters in it for the bile flow, has the lipoic acid for the NRF2 upregulation. It's got the milk thistle to smooth that all out. And it's got quercetin, luteolin, and then DIM, which stabilize the mast cells while all these, possibly allergenic toxins are moving through the system. And they also help NRF2 upregulation. So that liver sauce gets you take it, hold in your mouth for 60 seconds. It gets the cells to dump into the blood, gets the liver to pull the toxins in, it gets the liver to dump them out with the bile. And
Mhm.
then a half hour later, you come in with your binder. Your
Right.
binder, we call ultra binder, is a combination of activated carbon, clays, chitosan, which is like Welcol for mold binding,
Mm.
and IMD, this special metal binder that we made, and some acacia gum and aloe for the GI lining.
So Welcall's
And
the
so
that's the anti-hyperlipidemic medication, right? Welcall, is that what you said?
Welcol, yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, and Welcol is used like cholestyramine for
Yeah,
mold
it's a
binding.
binder. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so this is chitosan comes from chitin, but it's a non-allergenic chemical that either comes from mushrooms or shellfish, and it's a
Mm.
good
Okay.
binder. So you got
Cool.
all these different binders because you all got all these different toxins. So push catch, liver sauce, and binder, or add with that some kidney care and some glutathione, maybe some PC, and you have this 30-minute detox. Now, if you can do all that and then get in a sauna and sweat and get your temperature up to make heat shock proteins and then take your binder, whew, that just clears the playing field.
So are they flying you to LA to have parties so that you can just dose everybody the right times and at the right
Yeah,
moments?
we're actually making a subscription service for it.
Yeah, I mean, go. Chris comes on the plane. He'll take care of you. Just $5,000 an hour. No big deal.
That's right. No problem.
I like it. Well, Chris, this has been awesome. I want to change gears a little bit because
Yeah.
I heard you talking about, and we're going to finish up in a minute, that you were recently, I'm not sure if this is still the case, living with a monk.
Yes.
And I would love to hear how that came about and maybe what kind of monk he was and
Yeah.
like some of the lessons that you learned there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He is a Tibetan national who's over here on exile. He's about to get his citizenship this
Oh,
year.
cool. That's great.
He was a monk in the Bonpo lineage.
Yes,
Now,
I know it.
everybody knows about Tibetan Buddhists,
I
but
know
the
Tibetan Bonn.
pre-Buddhist
Yes.
religion was Bonn.
Yes.
And that's why when you look at these Tibetan Buddhists, you got these wrathful deities all in flame. They're all having sex. It's a much wilder thing than just this little Buddha with the curly hair and the tip,
Bonn's pretty
from
wild.
Southeast,
Yeah.
Southeast Asian Buddhism or Indian Buddhism. And that's because they absorbed all of these teachings of the Bonpo. And the pinnacle of their system is a meditative system called Dzogchen, which is very different than other, different than other meditations where you sit and count your breaths and stuff. You have your eyes closed. This one, your mouth is open, your tongue's down, your eyes are open, and it's just this wide open awareness. So it's a very cool, very, very cool system. So how did I get in touch with him? He has a teacher above him named Kempo, who's kind of the boss of the organization, and then the oldest guy is called Lopan Tenzin Namdak, and Lopan is 98 years old now and lives in Nepal, and he's not traveling anymore. But when he used to travel, he came to the U.S. and there was a white guy named Dennis Waterman who's now passed away, and they became very, very close.
Mm.
They believed they were together in a previous life doing this kind of thing, and
Incarnation. Sure.
so
Yeah.
Dennis was learning from him. He was originally in the Buddhist Dzogchen with Norbu Namkai, and a bunch of them defected over to, including John Reynolds and a couple authors, defected over to be with this Lopen guy. And so Dennis was my teacher.
I see.
There was a Buddhist guy that I got my name Dorje from, but then I was taught by Dennis, and so we had this connection. But then over on the side was this. He hates when I call him a trust fund yogi, but I love him very much. This guy named Wake, Brett Carr. He travels around the world, going to all these different ashrams and stuff. He goes to who's the guy in Thailand? Does all this seminal retention and stuff.
Oh, I don't
No, you totally know who he is. Uh,
know. Is
a
he a cult leader?
tantric Taoist guy in Thailand.
Okay.
Uh,
Cult leader or
no. He's a Chinese Taoist, but he lives over there,
gotcha.
and so he would go around all these different places, and then he got into this Bonn lineage, and then he just showed up at my house, the house that burned. He showed up like, a couple weeks before it burned, and he was going to see this Bonpo monk that was over in Littleton. And
Okay.
he's like, yeah, one day I'll introduce you and stuff. And then, the house burns down. I get a new house. And eventually he hooks me up with this guy. We get on the phone, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm going to move soon, probably down to Denver, but I don't know. I just want to get out of this house. And he told me where he's going to live maybe in Denver. And it was like the ghetto. And I was like,
Yeah.
why don't you come over to my house? I had to rent a really big house. I have a whole room here. And so the guy came over and he's like, oh my God, I'll totally stay here. And so we have like a whole shrine room and book room, meditation room
Oh, I gotta
going
come
on
over.
there.
This is awesome. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Every morning he's burning incense and doing some stuff. He just came over. We did a whole blessing on Quicksilver,
Oh, sweet.
with this, you can't really see
Oh,
it,
yeah,
but
I got through there. Yeah.
there's a little shrine over
There's a
there. And
shrine.
that
Yeah, it's
guy's
beautiful.
Zambala over there
Yeah.
is the deity of wealth and prosperity. And so, bringing some blessings to this. We'd had a Buddhist monk do it years ago at our old place. And so,
Yeah,
so
that's
that's
beautiful.
how I hooked up into this. And I go off and do retreats with him. We're going to host a retreat here in 2024. You'll have to come for that.
Oh,
Some
yeah.
of the guys will come from Nepal, and we'll go get a place up, not too far up in the mountains. Because it's a great, great lineage. I mean, it's
Yes.
powerful. It's the original one.
It's the OG. Yeah, I know it very
Yeah.
well from Dr. Ted and others, actually, the
Great.
Bonpo lineage. And it is Dzogchen is sort of the pinnacle of it, as you mentioned, right?
It's the
So
pinnacle.
yes, the great perfection. So, well, that's beautiful, Chris. It's really
Yeah.
really nice to chat with you. I think the last question I have for you, and then this could be like it's an overarching question for our podcast. It's like the three things that anybody can do to live smarter, not harder. So it could be anything from, hangover cures to Dzogchen retreats or whatever you feel like maybe three things that everybody can do to just live their life smarter, not harder. What do you think?
I do like that. The first one is give yourself space to be who you are. If you can't land in yourself and be comfortable here, if you're always looking for a distraction, you're always keeping yourself in sympathetic. You have to be able to land in your space. And if that just means sitting and breathing and being aware of your breath and the space around you, that will go so far towards getting your mind in a set and your body in a set where you can be healthy, even though all these things are around you, even though
Right.
all these toxins are coming in. And so mindset is the most important thing. And how are you going to find that? That could just be, just sitting in awareness, being aware of breath. Gratitude is probably the biggest one that Western people need.
Mhm.
And if you need to be taking in substances like GABA and CBD to help with that, do that.
Or
Second
psychedelics.
one is do some psychedelics.
Nice. Okay.
If you can't, this is a part of seeing who you are. If you can't see out, you can't have the experience of energy outside of yourself and all of it being interconnected. You will never have that knowledge of yourself as God. you will never have the empowerment of the connectivity that you have with everything. And you will always be at war with the other. And that connectivity will take you out of that war you have with the world around you.
Beautiful.
And the third is detoxify.
Love
If
it.
that's as easy as just bitters, do it. Double the bitters in your old fashioned. Put it in some water, bitters and binder. Those are pretty much, the simplest things to get in. And you need those pretty much for the rest of your life. In fact, there was a study done at the Russian Institute of Gerontology. These are the guys who came up with bioregulator peptides. And they just took mice that were already aged a little bit. And half of them they gave charcoal to, and half of them they didn't. And they lived 30 to 40% longer just by having charcoal going through their guts.
So just a little bit of charcoal can go a long way, huh?
Yeah.
Just a couple by your bedside, maybe? I think I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah. No, I do. I keep a little dish of the capsule binders in there, and I take a couple at night before I go to bed. And if I had been drinking, and if I wake up at 3:00 to pee, just throw a couple more in there.
I love it. Chris, this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. This is it's been a tour de force of detoxification, all the aspects of it. It's been beautiful. So I really appreciate your time, and all your efforts in this community for such a long time. And you're not somebody who just sort of rests. Like, you don't have to probably work as much as you do, but I know you love what you're doing. So so I appreciate all that. So where should people? I mean, I know probably everyone knows where to find you. What some
QuicksilverScientific.com. Get an account. If you're a practitioner, it's like an iceberg. Like 10% of it's on the website. And once you hit enter with your password as a practitioner, it opens up all the education portal, and there's a practitioner page, and every single webinar I ever did is on there. All the technical sheets and the downloads are in there. There's just tons, and there's a whole free online learning management system for learning the whole detox system. It's self-paced. So go in there, get the account as a practitioner, and go in there and get all that information. If you're a consumer, just sign up anyways and get on. There's some stuff that'll be available to you, and you'll get our newsletters, and you'll have all the bonuses of being inside the community. And then Instagram, there's drchristophershade.com or Dr. Christopher Shade, and there's Quicksilver Scientific, and you can follow a lot of this stuff more on the personal side on the Dr. Christopher Shade, more just on the company side on Quicksilver Scientific.
Yeah. Well, you rock, Chris. I really look
thank
forward
you so much
to come over to both. All that sounds great. I'm coming to Quicksilver.
And come over to my house.
I'm going to hang out with your Bonn practitioner.
Absolutely.
And I'll come on retreats. I'll bring somebody. I'll bring Dr. Ted with us. We'll have a good time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon. Take care, man.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Smarter Harder podcast, where we have 1-cent solutions to $64,000 questions. And man, Dr. Shade was just a tour de force, as mentioned earlier. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did listening to Dr. Shade and all the various things that he does and the world that he lives in and how he's doing so many amazing things in it. Check out transcriptions.com, check out homehope.org, subscribe and like our podcast. We'd love to hear more comments. We'd love to hear from you. Please let us know how you think our podcasts are going, what we can do, guests you think it might be fun to have on the show. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.